It was a little intimidating initially, just because it's Superman. It's such an iconic movie, such an iconic figure, and we wanted to do it right. We wanted to give it justice.
I think like a lot of people, there's always that question in our minds, is Zack going to be sort of traditional Superman, or is he going to be darker or twisted, as we know him to be in certain other permutations.
What I love about it is that it's the most naturalistic thing that he's done. I've never seen Zack do like the small town Americana, the real feel for that. Sort of the really startling part for me was when we saw it the first time through all the way after we finished Temp 1 was not only the action stuff it's amazing. It's just really well done.
Zack is an action beast. We always talk and joke about using sound as a weapon, and in his films, sonically, he is into vibrant action, and not necessarily just loud, but he does like really full embodiment. On this particular film, Eric Norris and myself co-supervised the film, and just because this effects-wise is just out of control, busy and creatively challenging, and so it really benefited both of us to work as a team to bounce ideas off and come up with really cool sounds.
We talked with John Fasal, who's a field recordist, and got some ideas from him, and he knew of a person who could help facilitate the recording. We ended up dropping a 9,000-pound K-rail from different heights. And then we also dragged it along the ground because sometimes in the action you'll see a character hit the ground so hard that they go cracking through the cement. And so we were trying to simulate that sound. When we went out to Arizona, we went to record the A-10 Warthogs. We started off at Davis-Monthan Air Base and recorded the sounds of the jets starting up. We went out to the runway, had the jets going by, did touch and goes, and then the next day we went out to Gila Bend and recorded them doing strafing runs. And it's a most amazing sound. It's a 30-millimeter cannon that shoots 4,200 rounds per minute. And so if you do the math, it ends up working out to about a 70 hertz tone. It doesn't sound like what you'd expect, but it's really scary, it's really aggressive. I was trying to figure out a way to, integrate that sound in, although I knew it couldn't be the only sound. So once we got the recordings back to the studio, I took the sound, so I was able to loop it up, and then place it underneath kind of as a base to the sounds that we'd already cut, that you could sort of expect from our library of the close-up sound of a Gatling gun. And then when Frankie mixed it all together, believe it or not, you can really hear, you have to listen for it, but you can really hear the sound of the actual A-10 Gatling gun, which I thought was pretty cool. Because even though here we are in a completely over-the-top action movie, there's a sliver of reality in the sound.
The one thing that I knew even before seeing anything was the planet Krypton was on tap, and so that was the most exciting thing because I knew that there were real-world atmospheres in Smallville and Metropolis and things like that. But the Kryptonian factor really was exciting because not only atmospherically was it exciting to think about how it sounded and the environments and the different spaceships involved in the planet, their technology, the Kryptonian technology, even got down to, at the beginning, I was asking the visual effects producer, DJ, I said, so what are these surfaces? Is it metal? Is it stone? And I thought I was going to get one or the two as an answer, and he said, everything is made of bone and shells compressed over all the years. And wow, what an original idea. So that really opened up some new opportunities for the Foley team, Gary Hecker and his crew and whatnot.
When we're on Krypton in the film, there are these visual displays, and what they did in visual effects was super cool, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It's kind of hard to describe, but basically it was like a moving particulate substance that would form into the information that they were displaying, and then it would reform. And so we had to come up with an interesting sound for that. So based on the images, we kind of got the idea of, like I said, it was particles. We got the idea of recording ball bearings, that kind of thing. So went out on a shopping trip and got ball bearings, went to a craft store and got little glass beads of a couple different sizes. I went to a sporting goods store and got BBs. And then from my house, I brought in like a metal bowl, a glass bowl, different cloths, and then ended up with just all this different stuff and did a big recording session, tried all different kinds of things. And that ended up giving us a library that we were able to manipulate into what you see for these displays on Krypton. We did a little Easter egg in the movie just to paying homage to this amazing character who's been around for over 75 years. When we first started working on the film, our colleagues were calling us up saying, "Hey, I've got the wind for you." And they were referring to the iconic Superman wind from the 1950s TV series with George Reeves. And so we had the idea, how fun would it be to actually put that wind in the movie? So we found a scene where we thought it would work. We put it in there in addition to our existing sounds, and then Frankie did, I think, a masterful job of mixing it just loud enough so that if you're listening for it, you can hear it, but not loud enough so that if you don't know it's there, it won't take you out of the movie.
In terms of the dialogue in the film, the actual production dialogue of the film, one of the big challenges, just technically, is in Smallville, they shot in Chicago, and there were tons of cicadas. The good news is, visually, you were seeing cornfields and this bucolic natural setting. So it actually worked, but it did dominate even a couple of emotional conversations. Kira Roessler was our dialogue ADR supervisor, and before we got to the mix stage, she wanted, obviously when they were cutting the film, they were concerned about how much of this are we going to be able to get out, and are we going to have to do a lot of ADR and whatnot. And she did an amazing job of just taking a first step before Chris got to it on the pre-dub stage, of just going through and selectively with a couple different pieces of software, just trying to notch out some of the cicadas without adversely affecting the dialogue, and that was key.
This movie, there were specifically related to the Krypton technology, challenges trying to use plugins and sounds. The challenge was, intelligibility versus, sort of over-the-top cheesy sound, but somehow it's got to not sound human and generic futz. So we did have to apply certain plugins that were used in combinations that was certainly new to me. That was where the creative stuff was.
I'm really happy that we started off with a 7.1 mix, because that fit into the Atmos bed of 7.1. The other two channels that make up the 9.1 obviously were the speaker array on the ceilings and whatnot. The one thing that I've always felt limited in, just with 5.1, as great as that was, and even 7.1, I was excited when we got into 7.1, but it just never felt as the human hears, just the spatiality and having those upper speakers and the full range surrounds and whatnot. Now we're able to express ourselves in the way our ears and our brain are used to hearing things and interpreting things. So that was the most exciting part of doing that.
My hope was that we could be subtle with it and not be like 3D, even though you have that opportunity to do it. So what we ended up with doing was taking music and actually using the whole room, so that if we have percussion and strings and brass up front, we could take beds of choirs or synth pads. Hans writes short and long strings. Long strings stay in the front, but short strings you can bring back to about a quarter of the way back the room. Choirs can play overhead, and what you actually end up with is like a cathedral. So rather than thinking that it's all point source, which some movies lend themselves towards, we wanted to stay really fluid and try to keep it elegant. And what we ended up with was an amazingly deep sound field that's environmental. It's very cool.
Sometimes we get lost a little bit in the novelty of what we bring to the table. And I'm always conscious of the first-time viewer. Are we getting the story? Are we clearing dialogue? We don't want anybody to lean over and say, what'd they say, take you out of the scene and then try to get back into the movie. So I always try to err on clarity. And if that means sacrificing whatever's at your fingertips, so be it. It's a real large collaborative effort with everybody. And you have to be sensitive to all the disciplines of dialogue and music and sound effects and what's working sonically and where the audio focuses in the track.
Peter Asher, who was one of the producers on the music, came in afterwards and he said, it's amazing. You hear every note, you hear every piece of the score, yet you hear all the action as well. And I think it's a tribute to Alyssa Muke, who's our music editor. It was really brilliant at just nudging stuff around a little bit here and there in order to make space for it. So I think when you see it, you'll be really surprised. It's a beautifully complemented music and effects job. This is the best team that I'll ever work with. I know that. My partners that I've worked with for all these years on this team, everybody knows each other's shorthand. We've managed to stick together for a long, long time. It's a really unique group of people. So we get it with each other. And they let you do your work and show up, and you know that your A game has to be there every single day. That the opportunity to do something like this just doesn't come along that often.